Alexander Isak made his Liverpool debut in their astonishing 3-2 win against Atletico Madrid, and in this video we're going to analyse exactly the touches that he made and what he showed on his debut for the team. So let's get into it. Now, although Alexander Isak wasn't necessarily the masterpiece of this game and wasn't really in the limelight, with people like Salah, people like Van Dijk scoring the last minute winner being obviously the ones that will get the headlines, but one of the biggest record Premier League signings, we have to talk about his debut and analyse what he did in the game. And I genuinely think, considering the limited amount of pre-season he had, there was a lot of encouragement and obviously great work which we expect from the player Isak is. Now, one of the first examples that I wanted to show in this game is that Alexander Isak is a player that likes going down to the left hand side. If you look at his heat map overall, you can see there's flashes everywhere on the pitch. He actually picked the ball up quite a lot on the right, but off the ball he was mostly in this left hand position. This would be when he'd work with Gakpo, and I think this is a connection that will happen more in the future. But when the transition would maybe happen a little bit slowly, or one of Liverpool's midfielders would win the ball back, you would often see Gakpo instantly go into these sort of areas while he'd switch with Isak, and Isak would come into these areas to give them an option. Now, this is because they want people to kind of go away from Isak, and it makes complete sense. Not only is Isak very good with the ball in these positions, but if a player comes towards him like this, someone else will have to cover the other players that are running, and this is why we talk about with Liverpool, they just get players to run everywhere, because it just means that players get spread out and they have to cover constant runs all the time. This will give Isak a lot of space in this position, and I genuinely think there's a few moments where maybe the connection was off because he's just getting used to his teammates, but sometimes I think he did some good work. You can tell he wants to dribble from this side inside. Like, he can go on the outside and go to the byline and come inside there, but it's not going to happen too much, I would have to feel, especially in games like this. But he is going to dribble inside, work with players in a 1-2, and then run off it to try and get inside. It's very clever of him, and we know he loves this left-hand side, which he is brilliant at. Now, we'll go into his box efficiency and how good he was around the box in some of the pictures, but on the tactical board, I also want to talk about some of the little flicks and work he did coming deeper. Now, this is why Isak, in my opinion, is one of the most complete strikers in the world, and it's not just because he's a guy that gets in the box and, finishes the goals like you expect him to. He is just so natural at everything. We spoke about his dribbling down the left-hand side, being a brilliant one-on-one player, going in or out on players, but it's just the ability to come deeper with the ball. When the ball is spread into him, he is instantly flicking it for other runners, and for a team like Liverpool that always have their attackers go forward in areas, it is something that really works, and I thought some of his flicks in this game were quite good at that. And that's what I mean by in these sort of areas, because he'd come down outside the block. He's away from the two centre-backs in this moment, so these two can't push up because the space will be given to someone like Wirtz to run into behind, or one of the other midfielders, and he can really work the ball, holding it in his own here and then passing the ball off and then running in behind. It baits people to come out. It's very hard for the defenders of here to kind of get him and mark him, and it was becoming a problem the entire time. Now, some of the other good work that he did in this game that I want to suggest is these sort of areas. Wirtz would give the ball into him in here, and it's hard for him maybe to get the right technique. This pass isn't brilliant into him. It's kind of hit a bit hard, and he kind of struggles to control it a little bit. But he's got three players around him, and he's one of the only players in the world that is able to cut in on his right foot in this area and still get a good shot away. This shot doesn't end up going in, it ends up going about wide, about here, but the fact that he's able to turn swivel on it and get a shot away in these tight areas is important. Soon, I'm sure that he'll be able to hold the ball up and maybe lay that off to Salah if he's a bit quicker there, but ultimately he is the striker, so you expect him to be the one that is confident to shoot over anyone else. And like we said, when you combine that with his dribbling ability on the left-hand side, when he picks up these little areas which other players have accounted for him, you see Gakpo in the middle here, Wirtz has come out wide, you've got another player running in here, it just creates space. And all these players, what they do is they create a little bit of a gap for Isak to go on a dribble past players, consistently make that run into this area and then shoot, because we know Gakpo likes to do that, but Gakpo doesn't have the dribbling level as someone like Isak, and it's probably not as prolific just generally. So you want Isak getting in these positions, and this is where he had his shot, which was at the goalkeeper because the angle kind of got closed down. This run, I will say, I don't think particularly helped him in the end, but I think that can be sorted out in the future when people get more used to it. But I do think his work overall with some of the players around him were good. I think Wirtz had one of his better games for Liverpool so far. Not brilliant, but I think he is getting there a bit better. better. But he had some nice little interchanges as well with Alexander Isak in 1-2s. He'd pass it into Isak. Isak would try and get the ball back into him, and it was created. I mean, this chance here ends up putting it perfectly through to Wirtz, who does, I think, gets a bit complicated, goes past Black, and then they kind of make a mess of it. But the idea is still correct. And not only is Isak just very intelligent around the box, he's not a hogger of the ball. He will happily pass it to people in better positions, like Sobosai here for the shot. I genuinely think his defensive work should get a mention as well. Because we talk about with someone like Ekitike, his heading probably be one of his weaker things, despite him obviously not being incredibly bad at it. He's been good at it so far. But Isak is so prolific in the air. And it doesn't come just from an attacking perspective where you can cross the ball in early. That isn't necessarily always what Liverpool do anyway. They do some crosses where other players run in, but they're not necessarily going to look for a target man in the box. It's not really how Liverpool play, especially you would imagine with a Gakpo and Salah who like coming in to shoot anyway. But I do think that's going to be a big important thing from Liverpool from set pieces and corners and defensive when they need to hold on for lead. He did some really good headers. I think he did 2 or 3 from corners where he just heads the ball out, he gets to the near post, he's dominant in the air, and it's always nice to have a player that can do that who's not necessarily a part of that defensive line. When you're going to have injuries in the future, you would want someone to come in and still be that level. Now, in terms of his stats in the game, they don't look brilliant, but I genuinely think he didn't have a bad game at all. He made a good amount of passes, being 13 out of 16. He had his 2 shots, which you can see are from that position that we mentioned, that left-hand side coming in from that left wing. And you can see he still was trying. 25 touches, 1 shot on target, 4 touches in the opposition box, 1 dribble successful, where that actually was really good when it worked, and the others he didn't quite work for him. 2 passes into the final third. He still contributed defensively, and in duels, he won 50% of ground duels, but I still think he will be fine overall. And I think in this game, what we realise is that he's going to play on this kind of left-hand side out of possession a lot of times, and I genuinely think his relationship with the left winger, whether that be Wirtz, who actually played there later in this game, whether that be Ngamoa, whether that be Gakpo, is going to be vital for Isak's success, because he needs that space. Sometimes he wants to come in and shoot more than often in that area, and ultimately I think you want to keep him away from Salah anyway. There's a few times I think in the second half he actually played it quite well down the tighter areas of the right hand side, like deeper, but you want to kind of keep Salah on that island away from everyone, so that isn't going to be something which is going to be like the primary attack for Liverpool. That's more of a, if things didn't work and if Salah's not on the pitch, that's what we can look to. Overall, I think Isak will be a great player, of course. I think in this game you have to consider the factors of a tough opponent. Liverpool in a lot of this game didn't necessarily play brilliant, I don't think, in many aspects, and you've also got to consider it's a new team. He's had barely any preseason, which is his own fault, but he hasn't had much, so it is a little bit harder to judge. But let me know in the comments what you guys think, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe for any more content, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you guys for watching.